Okay, we're taking a look at Paul Koenig's Civil War Brigade series. And there were 4 titles in the series: Gettysburg, Chancellorsville, Chickamauga, and Shiloh. Now, we won't be looking at Gettysburg today. For those of you who are interested, I've already done a full video on that game alone. But we'll be doing a brief overview of these 3 games. Now, Paul's games were actually derived from the old 1977 Avalon Hill edition of Gettysburg. I think Paul was enamored of that game system, and so was I. I thought the intermediate game of Gettysburg was a very fine game indeed. So Paul's system follows those rules very closely. Now, I'm not going to show you the games in the order they were published. We'll take a look at Chickamauga first, tell you a little about each game, and we'll go from there. Now we're looking at actually volume 4 first, so we're kind of going backwards in the series. Chickamauga. I think Chickamauga is probably the best of the 4 titles. A lot of people might say Gettysburg. Gettysburg is interesting too, but Chickamauga's got a very dynamic situation. We're just panning here on the map. We're looking north is at the top and south is at the bottom. Got nice graphics, nice looking map in fact. And you can see Chickamauga Creek. The Union troops are deployed to the west, Confederates here to the east, and the Confederates are astride Chickamauga Creek itself. The situation is very fluid. I remember playing Chickamauga a lot, the old SPI quad game, and it's a very fluid situation. Now I'm going to orient the camera now as if we were Confederates. So we are now looking west. And what the Confederates have a strategy is they could actually concentrate here and try to turn the Union right, because the Union reinforcements come here from the south. They could drive right through the center, which kind of happened in the real battle, or they could pick up the whole army and try to move by their right flank and turn the Union left, because this is the road to Rossville and Chattanooga. So Chickamauga is a very important battle in the Civil War, and an important battle on the west. This is also the battle where the Confederates, at great expense to themselves in logistics, managed to move part of Longstreet's corps from Virginia to Tennessee. That was a Herculean effort for the Confederacy, and they managed to pull it off. And they won the battle of it as a result. Chickamauga is considered pretty decisive. In view of what happened at Chattanooga later with Grant, it was somewhat nullified. But Chickamauga promised much for the Confederacy at the time. Now the counters are simple but clean. Here we have Hood's Corps deployed at the south end of the battlefield. The numbers are what we've come to expect in all games. The combat factors on the left and the movement factors on the right. Leadership, like Hood, command range for rallying, things like that. The stacking is simple and very clean. You're allowed to put 2 brigades on one space, plus an artillery unit. So you can stack up kind of nicely, not too high. You don't have these big mountainous stacks moving around. It's a very clean system. The combat results table is interesting. It's the same pretty well as the old Gettysburg 77 edition. You're more or less driving the enemy unit away from your position and you can occupy, or you're causing them to be disorganized, and you put these little disorganized markers on the unit when you do so. For example, if Cruft's brigade here got driven back and demoralized, he'd go back 2 squares. You'd mark him with a D2 counter. Later on in the reorganization phase, that D2 counter would be flipped to a D1, and again in the next phase that disorganization 1 marker would come off if he rallied. Units can also become shattered, and when that happens you put a shattered marker on them, and that means they're in a pretty sorry state of affairs, and you can sort of rally them in the night phase of the turn. So there's lots going on here, but it's a simple, clean system. I like this D1 shattered system. I know Paul liked it, and I certainly liked it back in '77 too. The system is very clean. One nice thing about the Brigade Level 2 and these games is you can explore historical possibilities in the battles. In that sense, the system is very good. I would rate the system as introductory level, but it's not quite Napoleon at Waterloo. A little bit more complex than that. So that's Chickamauga. We'll take a look now at Shiloh, show you what that game is all about. Keep in mind, too, that the games all share a common set of standard rules. So by learning one set of rules, you can actually play 4 of the games, which is kind of nice. Reminds me of the old quad series. Okay, we're taking a look at Shiloh now. This is the one that first appeared back in 2010 in Strategy and Tactics magazine. Now, I never owned that game. What we're looking at now is the redone game that Paul did under his own company. Now, it was my understanding that when the game came out from S&T, there was quite a lot of errata for it. And this isn't Paul's fault. I think S&T magazine really fumbled the ball once again with their magazine games. There was all kinds of counter errata. Anyway, that didn't, not taking anything away from the game. The game itself is pretty good. And Paul's edition corrects all those errors. Now, I think this is what he calls his Deluxe Edition, so this one comes in a little wee binder kind of rules. They're not complicated rules at all, by no means. What, 12 pages or so, turn effects chart on the back. And like I said, it's the old Gettysburg 77 system from Avalon Hill. Easy to read, good introductory game. Now, this is just an overall view of the map. For those of you who have the game, might say, hey, wait a minute, that's not the setup. No, this isn't the setup. I've just put some random units on there to show you the overall strategic situation at Shiloh. Now, Beauregard and Johnson came in a very peculiar formation at Shiloh. They came in with one corps behind each other. And many have attributed that to Beauregard with his love of Napoleonic tactics, that he wanted to do this kind of Napoleonic battle where he'd smash the Union. There's partial truth to that, but the actual reason the Confederates chose that formation was that was the only formation they could use to fit in between the creeks, the terrain. It wasn't by design that they necessarily went behind each other. They almost had to. So the Confederates come in depth, and as we know, the Confederate forces under Grant are rather scattered in their divisions. They're in their encampment formation. And this was the only battle in the war where strategic surprise was achieved against an army. And oddly enough, it was against General Grant, who was never strategically surprised again. So I think Grant learned a lot from this battle. I'll go closer to the board and we'll get some look at some of the terrain. This one's got quite a nice board too. I really like this board. It's perhaps a shade dark, but it does show the terrain very well, with the clear areas of the fields where farmers had their farms and stuff like that. There's the Shiloh Church is here, and the sunken road. Maybe a little overemphasized here, but it's certainly playable. And of course the Tennessee River, where Nelson's army of the Ohio is marching to the Tennessee. Buell, I should say. Nelson was one of his lead divisions. And for those of you who know the battle, we know that the Confederates pretty well have to drive as far as they can on April 6th, drive Grant's army into the Tennessee, because on April 7th, the night of April 6th, 7th, a new army is going to come in. Grant's going to be able to counterattack and push the Confederates back to Corinth. Now, according to Grant's memoirs, he says that Shiloh is one of the most misunderstood battles in the entire war, and there's a lot of mythology about it. If you ever get to read Grant's memoirs, I highly recommend you do so. They're very good. He's a very good writer. Let's take a closer look at the board. There's some of the Union units, and as I mentioned, these are not in their historical setups. I've just put some random units down. But you can see the units, again, very clean. Combat unit numbers on the left, movement factors on the right, and the color band indicates what division they're assigned to. Some of these I thought were a little difficult to see still. For example, W. Wallace is kind of a, sort of a light green, and Wraith and the boys here show up very well. McClernand's division in yellow. But some of the color choices are a little close and hard to tell apart. There's Sherman there in sort of a light blue. There's the Shiloh Church. You can see the trains. It's very well delineated. Clear terrain, different various elevations. The roads are quite clear. The forests are clear. And you've got some very heavy forests there. Show you some Confederate units here. Nothing too fancy there. Good color bands to show which division or corps they belong to. And again, the combat number and the movement number. We'll take a look at the turn record. Pretty basic, very clean. Gives you the hour, and the little flags indicate when certain units come onto the board. The map is done by Stephen Oliver, and I think he did a very good job. Nice job there, Stephen, on the Shiloh map. The game plays very well, much like many other Shiloh games I've played. The Confederates have got to drive hard on the first day, and they more or less have to win it on the first day. They've got to drive Grant into the Tennessee and destroy his army. After April 7th, it's a little late then. Okay, so that's the summary of Shiloh. Let's now take a look at Chancellorsville, Bloody May 1863. Okay, we're taking a look at Chancellorsville now. Now, the map that I'm going to show you is the one that you would get if you purchased the game. And it comes in 4 sections. And, of course, you'll have to piece these together very carefully and perhaps put a piece of plastic over them to get the full arrangement. But the map fits together perfectly fine. There's no problem there. But what I did was I did a larger version of the map. And for the purposes of the video, I'm going to use the larger map. The reason I'm doing that is because I made my own counters extra large so they'd fit on the large map. I don't have the original counters for the game just yet. And so for the purposes of the video, it's virtually the same map. Mine's perhaps a little darker, but that's the map you'll see. It'll be easier to see the counters with the large map. Okay, now most games on the Battle of Chancellorsville, and this is the example of the 1958 Avalon Hill game, have chosen the operational campaign to show the battle. And I've got this other map. It's a long story how I got it, but anyway, this is what most Chancellorsville games show. They usually show the Rappahannock River, the town of Fredericksburg, Mary's Heights, and the roads leading west to the Chancellorsville Crossroads, and they show the Rapidan and Rappahannock rivers. In other words, they're really showing all of Hooker's operational campaign. So when Paul's game Chancellorsville came out, I was quite surprised that he did not take that viewpoint. Paul's game is about the battle around the Chancellorsville Crossroads, not the campaign. Now at first I thought that's a bit of a mistake, because I find most of the fascinating things about the Chancellorsville campaign is the operational moves. But Paul's game concentrates around the Chancellorsville Crossroads, and that's what we're going to take a look at right now. Okay, so that's the battlefield of Chancellorsville, and that's my larger map. You can see the terrain effects chart on the left there, quite clear. Combat results table is nice and large and quite clear. That's one nice thing I like about this game, is the tables are very clear. Now the map, well, okay, it's not my favorite Chancellorsville map by any sense of the word. I find it extremely dark and very confusing and not easy to read. And well, that's all I can say about it. There's the logo there, Chancellorsville, Bloody May, and the graphics are still Stephen Oliver's map. Now, the orientation here is kind of odd, because most maps of Chancellorsville show the orientation this way. In other words, where we're looking at it now, north is at the top. So if we were looking at the Chancellorsville Crossroads here, we're kind of looking at it sideways. And Fairview Cemetery is there, and the Orange Plank Road is here. It's an odd orientation for the map, because when you play the game, it's most natural to have the Union player sitting there and the Confederate player here on the west side. So the orientation is sort of east-west, when nearly every map of Chancellorsville that I've ever seen is oriented north-south. So that takes some getting used to. Now I'm going to throw some counters down, not with the exact setup, but it'll give you an idea of what the game is all about compared to the other three. Remember, they all share a common game system. Let's look at a few of the historic sites on the map. Chancellorsville Crossroads, the Chandler House, the Ely's Ford Road up here, going to the Rapidan, and there's Scott's Ford over there, and US Ford on the Rappahannock. Like I said, the orientation takes some getting used to. There's the unfinished railroad and the furnace road. But we'll get some counters on here and you'll probably be able to see the orientation much better. Okay, before we look at the actual board game map, it might be well to look at a historical map too and explain the historical situation. So here we've got the orange turnpike here, the Chancellorsville House right at the crossroads. This is Howard's 11th Corps strung out along the pike, Wilderness Church, and you can see their right flank is bent back across the road. Here you've got Slocum's 12th Corps in front of Fairview Cemetery, and Sykes' 5th Corps coming down the turnpike and with a sharp angle going up this road here. This is Scott's Dam, and up here is US Ford. So the orientation here is north, that way. So that's west, that's east, of course south. Now these white units are Lee's 2 divisions, McLaw's and Anderson. Now you've got Jackson here beginning his flank march down the Furnace Road. He's going to come up the Brock Road up here off board and crash into Howard's 11th Corps. So that's the situation. Paul is showing just the Battle of Chancellorsville. Now I'm going to orient the map as the board would be oriented. So it would look like this when we look at the board. We're looking from the west down the Union line. So Jackson's men are going to come crashing in here, trying to roll up the right flank of the Union Army with the 11th Corps. So the game's essence is that Jackson is trying to roll up the Union right and somehow connect with Lee over here. So Lee actually is in a very dangerous situation. He's only got 2 divisions here, McLaw's and Anderson. Jackson is way off to the west on this flank march, and the Union Army is between him and Jackson. So all is not lost. Now traditionally, I always thought the campaign, or most historians too, thought that the campaign was lost when Hooker stopped his men when they came down from US Ford and marched east on the turnpike and stopped and went back. Most historians believe that was the turning point. But after reading Sears' book on Chancellorsville twice now, I'm becoming convinced that there was still a battle left in Hooker after they retired to the Chancellorsville Crossroads. Now, take the situation with Grant in 64. Grant crosses the Rapidan, Lee attacks from the west, and it's Chancellorsville all over again. The difference being that Grant didn't give up and continued south. Now, in Hooker's defense, when you read Sears' book, Hooker suffered a concussion at the Chancellorsville house. And, well, that certainly affected his thinking, and what we now know of concussions, I'm being a lot more forgiving to Hooker than I was before. And I think historians should be the same. If Grant had suffered a concussion on the first day of the Wilderness, how would the battle have gone? Anyway, all that to say this, that Paul's game does explore the possibility of Jackson's attack and Hooker's defense. So let's take a look at the actual board game. Okay, I've oriented the units all in the same direction so we can see them. So we're beginning here on the orange turnpike with Jackson's Corps, all the units with the yellow band, and a few units over here. And I'll go down the turnpike, as you can see the 11th Corps' refused right flank. Gilsa's brigade is going to get hit, Diekman's battery and McLean. We'll go down the pike And we'll continue down. And there's the Chancellorsville Crossroads. There's Slocum's 12th Corps. And we go up here, and there's Meade's 5th Corps going up that road I was showing you. And there is U.S. Ford. And I'll go back here, and you can see the big gap between Lee's men, McLaws and Anderson, the scattered brigades. There's Robert E. Lee himself, and the Union Army in between, with Jackson way off here to the west. Now, the odd thing about the battle is that Jackson took most of the day to do this long march, and the game starts at 5 p.m. So you only have really about 4 turns before nightfall. Well, actually 3. So it's a very short time scale for Jackson to turn the Union right flank. So that's why a lot of historians, I think, say that the battle was decided before that. But if Hooker had stayed, who knows what would have happened. So that's what this game is all about. Can you crush Hooker's army and get enough points and drive him away from Chancellorsville and try to link up with Lee's? That's what the game's all about. So that's Chancellorsville. Now I'm going to move a few counters here and see how it goes. Okay, on turn 1, only Jackson's corps is activated. So I'll move Jackson into an attack position, and we'll follow the action after he's done his initial attack. Okay, well there's a typical opening for the Confederates. I'm not saying it's the best one or the optimum one. It's just a opening. But as you can see, we've got an overwhelming attack on Gilsa there. And I'll roll the die, we'll implement the results, and we'll do a move or two to show you how this game works. We'll catch the action after the combat. Okay, this is after the combat result. The result was a DR plus D1. So von Gilsa took a step loss and he's supposed to retreat. But if you're in a forest, you can ignore the retreat. And if I was Union, I think I would have a unit hold on and hold up Jackson's corps there, buy some precious time. So I won't retreat, and we'll go on to the next turn, which means the Confederates get 2 turns in a row, because the 6 p.m. turn they move first. So we'll carry the action after I've moved Jackson's corps again. Okay, this is after the Confederates are moved. We've got several attacks going in here. High odds attack against Gilsa here. Pretty good attack against Diekman, and medium attacks here, but they are hitting all of Howard's 11th Corps all along the front. We'll catch the action after I've resolved all the combat results. Okay, after combat, the Confederates had some pretty bad die rolls. They got into some exchanges. They got a repulse here when they attacked Hall. They got an exchange there, or rather a D1. The 11th Corps is putting up a heck of a fight. Now, according to the rules, Howard is in the zone of control of Iverson, so I have to roll on the headquarters table. I roll, and it says, whoops, 1. Headquarters is eliminated. So Howard is killed in the action. So that's the Confederate turn. The Union will be able to move, but they have a lot of units that are not alerted yet. We'll see what the response will be. Okay, this turn, a few units for the Union come on at U.S. Ford. And this turn, all of the Union corps have to roll for alert status to see if they can move. So I'll do those rolls and we'll see what the Union can do. Okay, there's a mechanism to see which Union corps is alert, depending how far they are from Jackson's corps, not Lee's. And in the end, no Union units were alerted. So only the 11th Corps is alerted. And we'll see what they can do. They're in a bit of a fix right now. Okay, this is after the 11th Corps has moved. Now they're in a bit of a mess. These units pulled out because they didn't want to stay there and get destroyed. It would have been horrendous odds. So they took the penalty, pulled out, and had these D2 markers placed on them. This unit got caught. He moved 1, has a D2 marker on him. He's going to be forced to attack Hall at a disadvantage, but it's better than being destroyed. We'll catch the action after that combat is done. Okay, I forgot to put shattered markers on those units that took step losses. That's quite important in the game. When you're shattered, you can't voluntarily enter an enemy zone's control. So we've got some chewed up Confederates there, and the 11th Corps is pretty chewed up too. Okay, so we'll be going on to the 7 p.m. turn. Confederates will move. We'll see what they can do. Okay, this is after the Confederates have moved. They've got a high odds attack here. Not bad attack here. That's a nifty one. And, well, 50-50 there. The idea is I want to hit these deed units to get the combat modifier. We'll follow the action after I've rolled the dice for the combats. Okay, the 11th is putting up a hell of a fight. We've had some exchanges, DRs, a little bit of everything. You can see a lot of shattered units. It's lucky nightfall's coming. The Union is still pretty busted. They've only got 2 units here in their deed. And Jackson's Corps is getting very close to the 3rd Corps, so some men might wake up next turn. So we'll do the Union response. And we'll have to see how many corps wake up. Okay, the Union 3rd Corps alerted and Stoneman's cavalry. So the first phase is actually try to rally these D1 units. So we'll follow the action after I've attempted to rally these units and the Union response. Okay, this is the Union line after they've moved. They've got now a pretty good defense line against Jackson's Corps. And with the death of Howard, remember he was killed, this means that the Hooker can actually move now. Hooker can only move if a Corps commander is killed. So Hooker can move and uses reorganization value. Now I'm going to wrap the video there and just make some comments on the 3 titles in general. Okay, well in summary, how are these games? Well, they all share a common rule system, and the system isn't bad. I mean, the only thing I kind of bemoan the fact that is not included in the system is ranged artillery. But then ranged artillery was never in the original Gettysburg made by Avalon Hill either. So overall, these are 3 good introductory games. I think probably the most balanced and the most one that you can explore and with variables is Chickamauga. But I don't know, after I've played Chancellorsville here a bit, maybe my personal favorite is Chancellorsville because of the topic. I'm just very interested in the Chancellorsville campaign. Another thing you can do is to help set up your Chancellorsville game is just do a unit manifest, print it out, and then put your setup hexes here. I find that one of the things I don't like about games is setting them up and trying to set up individual brigades from a text list. It takes a long time. It's very time consuming. So if you make up this little chart here, I think it'll aid your setup in the Chancellorsville game. So that's the way we'll leave the game now. Jackson's got a good start on turning the flank of the 11th. He's got another hour before nightfall to exploit the resources. And there's definitely a game here. Definitely a game. So that's it for the Paul Koenig Civil War Battle Series. And thank you for watching.